This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
A lot going on, Real Talkers. I know we don't have to tell you that. And in this episode, we'll cover a lot of ground in just a moment, like less than 60 seconds. David Valentin, Liaison Strategies. They have new polling out. Interesting. Their federal tracker. How are the Conservatives doing, gaining ground on Mark Carney's Liberals or not? David's got an update. And of course, as NDP members from across the country gather in Winnipeg, that convention kicking off like 24 hours after we record this episode. We've got updated numbers on how the federal leadership candidates are resonating with everyday Canadians. If you're an ardent and diehard NDP supporter, these numbers might be discouraging. We'll get David's take on whatever the next leader will have to do to really establish themselves, to make themselves known across the country so that that party can, well, restore itself to its former status as a legitimate player in Ottawa, in Parliament. Of course, that's a big challenge. As we've heard from some of those leadership candidates, you know, over the past couple of months, we've checked in with Avi Lewis and Heather McPherson, Rob Ashton, those that have been leading the polls. David's got the numbers for us coming up. Plus, we have interesting responses after we asked Lynda Steele, veteran news anchor, talk show host, broadcaster, now podcaster, to give Mark Carney a one-year performance review, a grade, a report card, essentially. Literally hundreds of you have left comments on our posts about that, issuing your own report cards. We wanted to have, I guess a review, see where the audience is at on that. And we have a great email from an immigration lawyer who wrote in after we talked about Heather Gilchrist's plight in our most recent episode with Tristin Hopper. She's that Scottish midwife that's being threatened with deportation due to a lack of English language proficiency. Now, if you listen to the episode, you know it's a bunch of small print. It's ridiculous. It's a snafu. It's a glitch. But it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And, of course, it's waking people up across the country that we may have problems in paradise. The back nine of this episode, an inter-provincial trade panel. We asked our friends at the Alberta Chambers of Commerce to work with their colleagues, including the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce, to give us an honest assessment of how the feds and the provinces are doing in eliminating those barriers and decreasing our reliance, business reliance, economic reliance on the United States. We're going to get firsthand reports from 4 expert guests before this episode is up. Now, this show wouldn't be happening without the team at RapidX Financial. They're our presenting sponsor for this episode. And if you've been paying any attention to where crypto's at right now, to what's been happening with Bitcoin, I don't have to tell you that it can move fast, and your trust in an exchange absolutely cannot be a gamble. And that's the exact reason why we're proud to partner with RapidX Financial, a made-in-Alberta solution backed by the same experts behind those Rapid Cash ATMs that you've seen across Canada for 25 years. Saw another one in a convenience store just yesterday. Was in there with my little guys. I saw that Prairie brand. I love to see it. Well, RapidX Financial makes it easy to get started with 3 different ways to trade. You can use their physical crypto ATMs. Keep an eye out for them across the country. They've got an over-the-counter desk for the larger value trades, or for folks that could maybe use a little human guidance when they're buying their Bitcoin. And then, of course, that secure online platform. If you're happy to do it yourself with just a few easy steps at rapidxfinancial.com. A special offer for Real Talkers. This one doesn't expire, so every time that you use the promo code Ryan50, all one word, Ryan50, they're going to knock 50% off fees on all your online Interac e-transfer trades. RapidX Financial is secure, it's FinTrack registered, and critically, it's non-custodial, which means that you will always control your keys. That needs to be a non-starter. That needs to be a minimum standard. You got to control your keys, and you always will at rapidxfinancial.com. Well, you can read along if you'd like. Check out the numbers that we'll be talking about with David Valentin here by way of Liaison Strategies website. That's liaison.ca, where they roll out not just all of the polling numbers that they're producing, but of course, you got to make sure you check out David on the show here, because that's where we'll also get the analysis to go along with the reports that Canadians have provided. David steers the ship there at Liaison, a good friend of our show, of course, and he is in the spotlight in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. David, nice to see you again. Thanks for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, why don't we start with the federal polling numbers? The Liberals right now about a 14-point lead over Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives. Obviously, those are numbers that Poilievre would like to see closer. Conservatives would like to see him closer. Why don't you set the landscape for us, and we'll dig in from there.
Well, look, if you look at all the polling firms in Canada right now, our colleagues across the country have all been finding pretty similar numbers. And whether it's a 12-point lead or a 20-point lead, everyone at this point is registering double-digit leads for the Liberals. So it's not been a good environment for the Poilievre Conservatives right now. That being said, we're seeing some fluctuation. Some weeks they go up, other weeks they go down. At our firm, for the last 3 weeks in a row, we found the Liberals with a 14-point lead. So nothing is changing. It's almost a month of a 14-point lead for Mr. Carney. At the same time, we are seeing some movement in the sub-regional numbers that are shifting that are better for the Conservatives, primarily in Alberta, actually, where we've seen the most positive movement for the Conservatives in the last few weeks. But only because they went from very healthy leads in Alberta to a much tighter margin. And so now they're recovering, building that margin back up in Alberta. Right now, it's a 7-point lead over the Liberals in Alberta. Again, this is good news, but for the Tories. But whoever thought we would say a 7-point lead for the Tories in Alberta was even going to be possible, right?
Well,
They're used to pretty large leads in Alberta.
Yeah, it was usually going to be a 77-point lead, not a 7-point lead. So in a way, I guess Conservatives would be happy to be leading and have the numbers trending in the right direction, but the Liberals might actually not be too choked about that as well.
Well, I mean, listen, the vote is split between urban and rural in Alberta. Same situation we're seeing in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. The numbers that we're seeing from the prairies right now really make it likely that a lot of that support for the Liberals is coming from urban Canada. And what that means is you have races in Saskatoon that have not been competitive for the Liberal Party, certainly not since I was in politics for the last 20 years, that are now looking like they could become Liberal seats in the next election. All that being said, there is no election, so there's plenty of time, depending on how you look at it, especially with these by-elections coming up. We've got two happening in Toronto, a really important one in Quebec. And if the Liberals win all three, they'll have a majority government. But even if they just win two of them, they'll have a majority government. So either way, things are about to shift pretty soon as the composition changes on April 13th.
David, you talked about how the numbers, in particular Conservatives, but let's just say generally speaking, the landscape has been kind of dynamic. So you say, over the past few weeks, you've seen numbers rise and fall. What are some of the factors that check? I mean, the number one thing that I would think of would be Pierre Poilievre's interview with Joe Rogan. It's certainly one of the more prominent things that's happened that the eyes, can I say the eyes of the world have been on, or in particular, North American. Is it stuff like that factors in? Is it policy? Is it the war in Iran? What are the factors you're keeping an eye on?
Well, the number one thing that's driving these numbers is still Mr. Trump. And that has now metamorphosized into attention happening on Iran. Recession fears are going up. There's a lot of economic anxiety that we've been tracking in our surveys now that is really spiking high. Gas prices are going up. We know that inflation is expected to hit all sorts of categories as the months continue. A lot of the effects from the conflict in Iran are not going to be felt for quite a long while. Now, some people are cluing into that early, other people are not. But even so, they are seeing that immediate effect at the gas pumps. So I think it's a lot of economic anxiety. At the same time, some of the things Mr. Poilievre is doing haven't shown up in our surveys just yet. The Joe Rogan interview is a good example. It only took place recently. Most of our survey, which is a rolling survey, which means we refresh the sample every week, it's a 2-week rolling average, hasn't been updated yet. So next week, when we release on Monday, you'll see more of that movement, if there is any movement from the Rogan interview. That being said, that's one thing. That's one lever Mr. Poilievre was able to pull. There are not 100 more Joe Rogan type podcasts for him to go on, right? So now he needs to come up with other ways to stay relevant, be in the news media, and also make a positive impression.
What's your as a veteran pollster? What are your thoughts on the value? We've asked this of a number of different guests. Curious how you'll answer the value of Poilievre appearing on literally the world's biggest podcast. Estimated audience per episode around 11 million people. Worth it?
I think it's absolutely worth it. And the question is, could it be a negative? I think given his performance, which was quite good, really only positive things can come out of that. I think the fact that he sort of held the line on not attacking Mr. Carney, while in Texas, not attacking Mr. Trudeau. Surprisingly, it only really speaks to the kind of centrist character that Canadians would want to see of him. I think if we had seen more of this type of Mr. Poilievre for the last 2 years, certainly his favorability numbers would be in a very different place than they are now. But it's a tough situation because it's not that Canadians dislike Mr. Carney and dislike Mr. Poilievre, but dislike Mr. Poilievre more. We're seeing from the approval numbers, people really like Mr. Carney, 64% approval. We're getting close to him hitting a new high every other week. And really, you saw that honeymoon deteriorate last fall. The numbers began to tumble for him, and they've clawed right back up, and that's where they're staying. So it's not just a case of people don't like Mr. Carney, they like Mr. Poilievre less. They really do have this affection for the Prime Minister, rightly or wrongly. And there's a lot of people who will point out, what has gotten done. I know you're talking about a report card later on in the show.
Yeah.
That'll be a good conversation to have. But for a lot of people, the question is who should be dealing with Mr. Trump? Who should be dealing with the international community during a war in Iran? Some people will remember Mr. Poilievre very supportive of that Venezuelan intervention that Mr. Trump did earlier this year. So there's lots of mixed signals being sent out by the conservatives. And it's a good question. What would they be doing in Iran if given the opportunity? And I think they want to bring it back to domestic issues like the IRGC. For a lot of Canadians, that's a very complicated issue. I think a lot of Canadians could not tell you what the IRGC is. So there's limited benefit to talking about these kinds of things.
You're talking about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, just so I'm clear?
Okay.
Yeah, and so you're basically suggesting that over commentary or too much of a focus on that sort of a thing could harm the Conservatives?
I don't think it could harm them. I just think a lot of Canadians don't know what it is. And you hear them talk about, these terrorists that are in Canada. The RCMP is not doing their job. Why are these people here? Why haven't the Liberals removed these terrorists? I think these are all legitimate complaints. I think if there are members of the IRGC, absolutely, get them out of here. But for some Canadians, this is sort of an interesting situation where they don't perceive that threat in the same way maybe members of the Persian community in Canada would. So it sort of goes over their head, right? If you don't know what the IRGC is and you don't really believe it is a credible threat in the country, hearing them talk about this over and over and over. If you're a conservative, this is great news because you support your team no matter what. But if you're looking at swing voters, undecided voters, they would rather hear you talk about affordability or cost of living, healthcare, education. There's issues that they care about quite a lot, and the IRGC is not on that list.
We're talking to David Valentin, Liaison Strategies, in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, our live chat powered by Park Power. A lot of different takes on it. Tom says, for example, I would never even watch a disinformation spreader like Joe Rogan. Amanda says he came across as full of crap on Rogan. I don't know. Denise says, have the Conservatives provided any alternative policies or just complaints? I guess that's sort of, something that we hear for, opposition parties at every single level. People may level the same criticism at the Alberta NDP or what have you. Pick your opposition party in whatever jurisdiction. Is that kind of what you're talking about here, alternative policies? If you're Pierre Poilievre, you're going, I have to come across as prime ministerial. And I would imagine that part of that probably involves how do you look when it comes to international incidents? How do you present yourself? How do you present your party? It might be a tough balance to find, a tough line to walk, the domestic versus international, when you're trying to come across as he said on Rogan, a prime minister in waiting.
It's a really tough job, and let me be really clear about that. Leader of the opposition is probably the worst job in politics. You need to look like a prime minister, but you have to go after the government. It can be a really hard balancing act. I think part of the situation for Mr. Poilievre right now is he is not coming into this as a new leader, right? He's been leader for a while now. He built a brand. Whether you like it or not, that brand definitely made an impression on Canadians. And most Canadians didn't like what they saw. And so it worked out fine when he was running against Mr. Trudeau, because Mr. Trudeau was truly disliked by so much of the country that given that choice, right, they were happy to choose Mr. Poilievre. But now he's not running against someone who is detested by a lot of Canadians, but someone who is really liked by a lot of Canadians. And he still has all this brand he's accumulated. So it's a really interesting situation. How do you change people's perception of you over time? And I think if the Joe Rogan interview is part of a long series of steps to reintroduce Mr. Poilievre to Canadians, maybe it can be successful. But apart from that, they have to be hoping that Mr. Carney does something or says something so egregious that people really sour on him. And so far, he's not doing any of that just yet.
Yeah, I mean, I guess respectfully, good luck with the former governor of two national banks, Bank of Canada, Bank of England. I'm not sure that he's going to say something egregious, but you never know, David. Crazier things have happened. I hate to make you uncomfortable here and put you in a position where you're not accustomed to be. I know you prefer to poll other people, but I have to ask you for a report card grade. For Mark Carney, he's now about a year and 2 weeks in to his tenure as prime minister. Lynda Steele, broadcaster, laid out her argument. She gave him, well, I don't know if I should muddy the waters by telling you what she gave him. I will. She gave him a B+, and Real Talkers have been all over the map on their grades. I'll read those after I talk to you, but where would you grade him based on what the promises made looked like and what he's delivered, or at least how he's carried himself so far?
That's an interesting question, and I guess I would be tempted to grade him on a curve. He made a lot of promises. Some of them haven't been kept. Some of them, I think despite his best efforts, if there had been a different president in the White House, he might have been able to keep them. In the United Kingdom, we're seeing a prime minister who really did improve economic fortunes for Britain. And then here comes the Iran war to undo all the work he did and to create new economic havoc. So it's hard from that perspective. How do you grade him when there's all these external factors taking place? I guess I'd give him a B. And I think he's done a good job. I certainly want him to succeed. I think all Canadians want the prime minister to succeed and for Canada to succeed as a whole. That being said, as a pollster, his grades are incredible. Getting a 64%, a year out, despite all of these external things happening, is very impressive, especially when you consider he's leading a government that's been in power for quite a long while. So from that perspective, he's doing very, very well from a polling perspective. But, me personally, I think he's doing decently enough. That being said, I think we're all anxious to see if there's more progress that can be made, especially when a potential recession is on the horizon.
David, what sort of an impact do you think the floor crossings have had on public opinion on both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre? As far as I can tell, there have been 4 or more floor crossings through a session, through the term of a government. But as far as I can tell, never before has a sitting government, a federal government, attracted 4 floor crossers in one term. So it's unprecedented in Canadian political history. I know some people, it really turns them off. A lot of other people, they get pretty jazzed up about it. It's all part of politics. It's all part of the game. It obviously sends an interesting message, maybe some questions around the leadership of the Conservatives. Not all crossers have been Conservatives, of course. The NDP's lost one as well. But has that factored in?
So I think yes and no. It certainly did not help Mr. Poilievre with the impression Canadians have of him. And listen, Canadians hate floor crossers if it's happening from their party and someone's going to another. And they love floor crossers if someone is crossing into their party or the party they support, right? I mean, you can see how public opinion shifts on these things depending on who is crossing in which direction. That being said, I think the more interesting thing is, there's a real theory that part of the reason why Mr. Carney is having an easier time is because has a minority government. And that some Canadians are cognizant there's a difference between a minority and a majority government. They understand that he's somewhat constrained. So what will happen when Canadians are told, okay, Mr. Carney has a majority government now? I think there is a subsection of people who will be expecting more out of him now. Their expectations will be raised because as far as they're concerned, even if it's a 1-seat majority, well, he got a majority. That's an upgrade. Now you should be able to do more with that. Will they judge him differently if he's not able to accomplish things once that takes place? I think that's a more interesting question and a more interesting frame for news coverage moving forward. But my guess is we're all going to be told about this shift in the government once these by-elections take place on April 13th. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to track how much people pay attention to it, what they believe that will mean for the government actions taking place in the future. But also if they're grading of Mr. Carney, changes? Should he be put on a different curve once he has a majority government?
Tom's watching us on our live stream presented by California Closets on YouTube. Tom says Mark Carney's been bad or poor on the energy transmission. He's been good on foreign trade, and he's been not so good on inter-provincial trade. Remind Tom and others coming up in about, less than 20 minutes. We'll have the CEOs of both the Alberta and Manitoba Chambers of Commerce, plus the CEOs, or at least executives at Accusteel Heavy Haul Trailers and at Diesel Tech Industries. So we're going to get an industry perspective on the inter-provincial trade stuff. I think that'll be an interesting one. And obviously developments there, ringing endorsements from the business communities that barriers are being kicked down would go well for any government. It's easy to suggest, David, that Mark Carney's credibility, and I may even say star power, saved the Liberals. They were on a road to ruin right around the time that Justin Trudeau was getting set to step down. The NDP, hoping, I suppose, for that same magic bullet, that prominent, well-known, widely respected Canadian that could come in and save the day. And you've got some polling leading into their federal convention. It kicks off about a day from now, just less than a day from now in Winnipeg. But at first glance, if I'm a federal NDP member, if I'm a federal NDP supporter, I'm a little bit discouraged by the returns. Can you lay it out for us?
So we did a survey in September to look at two of the NDP hopefuls at that point, Heather McPherson and Avi Lewis. And the really interesting thing is they've done this whole entire leadership race. And when we look at the number of Canadians who now say they know something about Ms. McPherson or Mr. Lewis, the number has not changed. So we have seen a change among people who already knew who they were, which is good. Both of them have made traction in terms of growing their positives. Mr. Lewis has higher negatives. So Ms. McPherson has a higher net positive score. But that being said, the number of Canadians who have tuned into the race has not changed. So 67% still tell us they don't know who Heather McPherson is. 50% tell us they don't know who Avi Lewis is, have no impression of him whatsoever. The other candidates who are running, Rob Ashton and honestly, I'm having trouble remembering their names myself because it can be challenging. But, they've made even less of an impression. Antony McQuail, who is running for leader, 88% say they've never heard of him, have no impression of him. Tenniel Johnston, 94% are saying the same. So unless you're a real politics nerd, you don't know who these people are. The ones that you do know, primarily Mr. Lewis and Ms. McPherson, they're the front runners, so this makes sense. There's always the possibility someone like Mr. Ashton could come up the middle. That's what his campaign has been telling the press. They've changed their negatives. Again, Mr. Lewis, a more divisive figure, but better known than Ms. McPherson. So very difficult to know if either of them are going to be able to do anything for the brand in the long term. But they're going to have that opportunity. And I would say their best chance to introduce themselves comes right after this convention. That post-convention tour, they're going to want to leverage that into as much of a leadership bump as they possibly can.
What's behind, do you think the I don't know, do I say sort of maybe the potential polarizing nature of Avi Lewis? You're saying he's the most well-known, but it sounds to, I don't want to say the least liked, but it seems like, your demographic is split on him.
Well, I mean, he's coming into it with the most baggage, right? He still has a net positive rating. We're not seeing numbers like Mr. Poilievre, who is consistently in a double-digit net unfavorability. But that being said, the way that he's made attention is by taking sharp positions on things, and he's better known among non-NDP members than Ms. McPherson is. Now, these are people who are not going to vote NDP in the next election, most likely, but they're learning about him through his policy pronouncements, right? And it's a bit of both. You gain some, if you take a sharp position, you gain some voters, you lose some voters. That being said, maybe that's better than not being known at all.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you got to give Pierre Poilievre credit for during that most recent conservative leadership race, the guy doubled the conservative membership and raised a ton of cash. And that's what any party hopes to do through a leadership race. The numbers here suggesting that maybe generally speaking, this hasn't been that productive of an exercise for the party that finds itself in financial trouble, polling trouble, and everything else.
I think what we're seeing is that the number of people who paid attention to the leadership race has not changed since September. Now, among those group of people who are looking at the race, we also haven't seen voter intention numbers shift significantly either. So it hasn't had much of a lift just yet, but I think that big opportunity is coming once they select that one person, and that one person can hopefully dominate the media cycle for a week or two from a Canadian federal perspective, and go on to do, tours and media outreach, more interviews, and leverage that into more name recognition and, hopefully some success. I think there will also be a question of what by-elections come next, right? We've been hearing for a while Mr. Wilkinson might resign. He's in a Vancouver area seat. Here in Ontario, Mr. Nader Smith has suggested he will resign in the summer. That creates a potential opening. Both of those seats would be attractive seats for the leader of the NDP to run in. And so then it becomes the expectations game. If they run, do they win? I think if they win, you'll see even more Canadians learn about that leader. And if they lose, maybe more Canadians learn about that person too, but maybe not for the reasons they would like.
David, it's always good to see your face. We always appreciate your analysis, and thanks for doing this. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, you got it. That's David Valentin, of course, steering the ship at Liaison Strategies. You can find them online at liaison.ca. And if you're listening to the podcast here, if you're watching YouTube after our live stream, we'll punch all of that information into the show notes, including links to our interviews with Avi Lewis. That was January 21st, Heather McPherson on February 10th, and Rob Ashton on February 25th. You can check out those 3 interviews. Let us know if you're on your way to Winnipeg, if you're going to be checking this convention out in person. We'd love to hear from you. Get your firsthand report. You can send us an email anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. In our live chat powered by Park Power, Vinny says Poilievre's appearance on Rogan pushed more Conservatives away from him than pulled them together. I don't know about that, Vinny. I'm not sure. Follow-up comment. Let me know why you think that is. I haven't heard a lot of, anecdotally, I haven't heard a lot of Conservatives say that they were dissatisfied with Poilievre's performance on Rogan, but I'd love to hear your argument on it. Dubious says Poilievre was a couple of years late going on Rogan, which you could make that argument. Says Rogan's fallen off twice now, once for the left and now for the right. His flip-flopping on Trump showed that he has no idea what he's talking about. Rob's watching our live stream presented by California Closets on Facebook. What's up, Rob? He says Joe Rogan is a choice, I guess, but at least Poilievre never went on Charlie Kirk like he originally had hoped to. Let us know what you think to talk@ryanjesperson.com on that. We did want to take a second, Johnny, we wanted to focus on where Real Talkers have scored the Prime Minister in his first year. Mark Carney, first year as PM. Lynda Steele joined us a couple of episodes ago. You can check that out. That was the 24th of March, I think, that Lynda joined us, and a really good conversation. She, of course, we released the highlight. You can follow us on all the social media platforms, and she lays out why she scored Mark Carney at a B+. She's talking about the energy projects, negotiations, some of the work that's left to be done. There's more than 800 comments on the Facebook post alone, and so we won't have time to read them all. But Gerald gives Carney a B+ through year one, says he's done what needs doing, but he should be spending more time in Canada. Let his finance minister do the job of building business relationships. Deborah, what's up, Deborah? Says, I agree with a lot of what Lynda said about Carney, but I believe, says Deborah, he's the best thing that's happened to Canada in a long time. Says he gets an A from me. James gives the PM an F through his first year. Ryan gives him a D. TD is, I don't know, does that stand for Trudeau derangement? I don't know. TD says, no surprise, Ryan, you put on a news anchor that just pumped Carney's tires. Propaganda bullshit. Nonpartisan, my ass. That from TD. Kelly says it's a lot to tackle in a year, and Carney has not shied away from the work. Says, but Canadians have to be patient for once in our lives. Rick says that we scored with Prime Minister Mark Carney, says the right guy for this huge job in these trying times. Dan says rising polling numbers, Pierre's falling numbers show that most Canadians think that Carney's doing a good job, and facts are facts. David says results will take years to bear, but at least Carney's trying. Domestically, he says internationally, he's done exceptionally well. Judy gives an A+. says he's the right man for the job. Some people say he travels too much. I think he's trying to build relationships with other countries. Rob wonders if there's any score lower than an F that he can grade. He wonders if F- is a thing. Beverly says, I understand things take time, to come to fruition. Liz lets us know she didn't vote for the PM, but she's sure happy that he won. Says he's done a great job in dealing with Trump and his unstable administration. Colin says he's only been on the job for a year. Results, give him a chance. Jerry wonders if lower than 0 is possible for a score. Jason says, we can't have a short-sighted view here. We got to look forward. Carney has positioned Canada for success when it comes to upcoming CUSMA negotiations. Dan's talking about how he rates things based on his day-to-day life. And Dan, so do a bunch of other people. Nobody would blame you for that. He says, my grocery bills have gone up. My fuel costs have gone up. My taxes have gone up. Healthcare's in a pinch. Oil and gas in a pinch. Auto industry in a pinch. Says at least we've got Mark Carney's portfolio and Brookfield. Dan says, I'm sure he's done great things for China, India, Ukraine. But as a Canadian living here footing the bill, I can't say I'd even consider giving him a D because that feels too high for an underachiever who made promises and didn't follow through. Then Christine and Fiona both give A+ right after that. So there's a limited sample size. You still have time to check in. You can connect with me personally, Ryan Jesperson, on Facebook and LinkedIn. That's where you'll find our stuff. You can follow Real Talk RJ on Instagram, on X, and on TikTok. And that's where you'll find all of our highlights from each and every show. We had an interesting conversation with Tristin Hopper about this immigration snafu. You've probably seen the story about Heather Gilchrist, the Scottish midwife who invested $60,000 of her own money, she says, to move to Canada, to go back to school, to have her certifications translate and make her eligible for employment here in Canada. And it's prompted an interesting response, including an email from an immigration lawyer. We're going to get to that before the episode is up. But it makes sense to transition to talk about inter-provincial trade. It's a big file in front of the Prime Minister and his now minority government. We'll see if that changes or not. And also on the desks of every Canadian premier. But of course, it impacts those that are doing business both here in Canada and abroad as well. And in just a moment, our Real Talk Roundtable, in partnership with the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, will focus on interprovincial trade. We wanted to get a real, no-holds-barred assessment of where Canada's at, including those that are doing businesses in provinces across this incredible country. That's coming up in just a moment. We want to let you know that this show is happening with the support of our friends at Park Power. They're powering that live chat each and every episode. You can find them online at parkpower.ca. If you're living in our home province of Alberta, you can choose to get your electricity, your natural gas, and your internet from wherever you like. And we absolutely and wholeheartedly recommend Park Power online at parkpower.ca. They're your friendly local utilities provider. If you're looking for bundling opportunities, in other words, if you're making a bottom line decision for your family and you're going, hell, I'll bring internet, electricity, and natural gas over to Park Power if it makes financial sense, well, you're going to find exclusive promo codes at parkpower.ca/realtalk that could save you up to $150 off your first bill. That's right. If you bundle all three, the promo code REALTALK, all one word, will knock $150 off your first bill from Park Power. You can check out those incentives, view their plans, and sign up today at parkpower.ca/realtalk. We're so proud to be supporting UCAN Youth Services as our charity of choice for 2026, and that included participation. I make it sound so official. We showed up for a comedy night. We laughed our asses off for like 2 hours and helped them raise a bunch of money to help young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. I know that a lot of industry leaders are going to be watching this episode because of the roundtable you're about to hear. And I want to let you know, if you are hiring or looking to hire entry-level employees that are reliable, that are trained up, that are motivated, that are going to be a positive addition to your team, you have to connect with UCAN Youth Services at ucan.ca. They have employment partners that allow youth an opportunity to succeed, but The workforce is benefiting as well. You can play as an employment partner a direct role in shaping the future of young people while gaining access to those candidates, those supported candidates ready to contribute to your team. You can become a partner today by visiting youcan.ca. We're always looking to save you money, and most times, I could even say more importantly, to save you quality time with your family. And that's where Friesen Brothers comes in with the upcoming Easter holidays. If you're going to be hosting friends or family at your home, we recommend a quick visit to cateringbyfriesen.com. In particular, today I'm recommending the signature Easter meal. This is a meal for 6 people for just $239 plus GST. Prepared by Red Seal chefs, ready to go into the oven. You pull it out warm and it's ready to serve. That includes everything: roasted turkey, scalloped potatoes, creamy dill carrots that will blow your mind, granny stuffing, Caesar salad, tray buns, cranberry sauce, turkey gravy, apple crumble pie. The list almost too long to read it in its entirety, and you can order it right up until April 9th. That's at cateringbyfriesen.com. If you're on a bit more of a budget, or maybe you're feeding fewer people, the classic Easter dinner box is just $99 and feeds 4. You can get all the details at cateringbyfriesen.com. And before we head into our roundtable, we do want to remind you that March is Women's Health Research Month. If you had a chance to catch our roundtable a week ago tomorrow, this is last Friday, then you already know this. The 20th of March just had some absolute powerhouses in studio, right here in our Mercer Warehouse studio, talking about the research that's happening right now in women's health. The truth of the matter is, though, research has not highlighted, focused on, nor served women's health for decades. So there's a lot of ground to gain. If you want the reality check, if you want to learn what's happening in the space, make sure you check out that episode. That's the 20th of March. And if you feel prompted to take action, then check out albertawomen'shealthfoundation.org. That's where you can learn more about Women's Health Research Month. This is a proud partnership with the Alberta Women's Health Foundation. We talk a lot about interprovincial trade, and we have been promising you, Real Talkers, this conversation for quite some time. You know, Canada, including provincial and federal politicians, have been talking a big game on free trade within our own borders for decades. But the reality is interprovincial trade barriers are still very real. There's different regulations, certifications, different standards from province to province, and they continue to slow down business. They're driving up costs and they're limiting growth, especially for companies that are trying to scale, and maybe even in particular in Western Canada. We're about to find out. Layer in current pressure from the United States, protectionist rhetoric, tariffs, and an unpredictable economic relationship, CUSMA as an example, and suddenly these internal barriers start to look like less of a nuisance and maybe more of a liability. We've been hearing that from Shauna Feth for months and months, and that's why this conversation matters. The Prime Minister's made a clear commitment to dismantle these trade barriers within Canada, to unlock what's often described as Canada's hidden economy. But the question is, what does that actually look like in practice, and how quickly can it happen? So today we're bringing in prairie-based business leaders, innovators who deal with this reality every day to find out what's working, what's not, and what needs to change if Canada is going to compete both at home and abroad. It's a real pleasure to welcome in studio in our historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton, the CEO of Accusteel Heavy Haul Trailers. He's been recognized as a top 40 under 40 by Edify. Antu Chicahuala, it's nice to see you here. Thanks for making time for us.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
Rebecca Goldsack also joining us around the table. Rebecca's the COO at Diesel Tech Industries in Edmonton. A lot of people might know that, of course, by a different name, right? DTI Guardian. And, of course, that's where, Rebecca, you're helping drive innovation in transportation. You're also the chair of Hydrogen Alberta. Nice to have you in studio.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. And we won't blame our other two panelists. Number one, he's joining us from Manitoba, so he couldn't be in studio with us. And number two, she was staring down some wild Alberta highways this morning. It is a real pleasure to welcome the president and CEOs of the Manitoba and Alberta Chambers of Commerce, Chuck Davidson, joining us out of Manitoba, and of course Shauna with her Eye on Alberta business, joining us once every single month. Good morning to you both, and thanks for making time for us.
Morning, Ron.
Thanks, Ryan.
Chuck, why don't we start with you? You're making your Real Talk debut. We love having Manitoba represented in this conversation. Inter-provincial trade barriers. You guys have obviously thousands of members. It's a very real issue across the country. How is that manifesting itself in the day-to-day of your member businesses?
Well, I think, Ryan, and appreciate this first time being on the show with you. There's no question about this. This is something that our businesses have been dealing with, and I think more so in the past year that this has been something with the challenge with the United States and the downturn in trade with the U.S. and making it more difficult. We need to start looking at other opportunities, and part of those opportunities really were to how do you diversify. And so we've talked a lot about, well, we need to diversify and go into other export markets. And when people think about that, for the most part, they think about going to other countries. What we've been suggesting is, well, let's look what's right in front of us. Let's look in terms of partnerships with other provinces that exist, reducing that reliance on the U.S. and looking at some of those opportunities between provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta. And so that's something that we're really focused on right now because we think it's something that can help businesses. It can look at helping supply chains. It can help at looking at different clients and different customers. And so that's really a focus for us right now as well. There's no question, seen a downturn. Let's look at the opportunity that's sitting right in front of us.
Antu, how does it impact you in your day-to-day, in the heavy haul trailer business, the hauling business? People may kind of go, I wouldn't have thought interprovincial trade barriers would exist in that business, but is this a real headache for you?
Yeah, so on the manufacturing side of that equipment, we've known for many years, province to province regulations change, what's allowed for legal load limits, something as simple as a D or oversized sign. You need to design special equipment for each province. And over the years, it's naturally created a bit of a protectionism. We have, 12, 13 countries inside of one country. And so now as we look to move forward here, there's lots of opportunity to open this up. We're relying a lot less as a country now on equipment coming in from the United States just because of the risk that brings. On the supply chain side, we're also seeing a lot of risks and a lot of downsides to bringing stuff in from down south. COVID taught us the fragility of our supply chains globally. So a lot of us shifted to, let's say, North America. And now with these tariff threats and all the geopolitical risks going on, the conversation keeps going. What used to be unprecedented is now the new precedent. And so we're all looking interprovincially within Canada to see where we can work with our supply chains, both up and down the ladder.
So Rebecca, how about in your world professionally? Is it a headache, a nuisance, or has it stopped your company from being able to maximize its economic or its revenue potential?
It's interesting because depending on what market we're talking about, it varies very much. So within our technology, there's a huge regulatory requirement for it. So Transport Canada certifications and such. So it's actually been a large benefit to us because that is a federally regulated item. But at the same time, too, there's lots of interprovincial legislation that then plays into it as well. So then they've got a little bit nuances within different regulations. So as a whole, it's, only helped industry. And I think this is very much what, COVID has taught us. And, a lot of organizations want to, use a Canadian technology, want to work with Canadian companies. And this is really that push that we needed to really see the value in buying Canadian.
Shauna, it's sure interesting to hear both the business leaders sitting around this table both reference the challenges and the lessons learned from COVID and apply that right now to challenges with the United States and other factors as well. Is that something that's been on your radar this entire time, that maybe a lot of these businesses have kind of been into one, as we might say? They've been in the trenches on this for 5, 6, 7 years now?
Yeah, and particularly, even in the last 2 years, seeing it even elevated more so. To Chuck's point, the thing that's really showing up is there's clearly risk showing up every day for business operations. And that can be everything from those labor constraints to supply disruption, which we're hearing. But also it's that tariff exposure, it's cost volatility. Like there's so many things, and they're often showing up at the same time. And so what we do is we benchmark. So we've talked about before on the show, Ryan, our Alberta Perspectives research and the benchmarking that we do with our businesses across the province. In the last 2 years, our Alberta Perspectives research in 2025 and 2026 has just shot interprovincial trade barriers and strengthening domestic supply chains to the top of the priorities for Alberta businesses, where we need to be focusing our time to support them and to find ways for them to discover some of these new opportunities throughout the country.
Chuck, is there a specific prairie angle on this? Like, is this, I won't say it's not an exclusive issue in Western Canada for sure, but when we're looking at Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta in particular, do you see some unique factors at play?
Well, I think we're very like-minded in terms of what some of our key sectors are, obviously from an agricultural, from a manufacturing, energy is key as well for us. And I think when you look at those sectors that the three provinces have, it makes sense for us to work closer together. Obviously, in terms of the New West Partnership is something we already have a bit of a structure that exists. We haven't really taken advantage of it as much as we need to. And I think part of the advantage that we do have is when we talk about those internal trade barriers that we have, I think all three provinces have done a relatively good job of addressing. We have few barriers, but we still have those challenges. I think the bigger picture for a lot of our companies is that we've been so used to having that north-south relationship in terms of what our trade looked like. If you look at Manitoba, for example, 73% of all exports that were coming from companies in Manitoba was going south of the border. They were our number one trading partner by a mile, and it wasn't even close. And I think what's happened over the course of this past year is we've seen a significant decrease from that 73% to it's getting into the low 60s now. And so businesses have been trying to have to figure out how they can pivot, how they can adapt. And I think the natural, real opportunity, as we've kind of talked about, is looking within Canada. And I think that's something that we've taken for granted. We've become lazy. We haven't taken advantage of that relationship. Now is the perfect time to do it. Are there some barriers that still exist? And I think both of the guests in studio have identified some of those. We need to continue to get rid of those barriers. Mutual recognition is great, but we also need to help those businesses along the way to introduce them to businesses in other provinces as well and start developing some of those relationships that they haven't had to do in the past number of years.
Has that been your experience? Like you find yourself pushed almost? I remember when I left a small private junior high school, I went to a big public high school. I was pushed out of my comfort zone. You know what I mean? I had to meet a whole bunch of new people, build new relationships. Is there an equivalent there today?
Oh, 100%. You know, when you think about, making those new connections, working with different organizations to, come up with that common goal, even just, interprovincially, just going and having boots on the ground in a particular, the next province over and having those conversations, because we all have very similar problems to solve, but working together to solve those problems are a huge part in how we end up, solving and diversifying, the Canadian market. And when you look at, where we are today, unfortunately there's only 40 million Canadians, whereas in the US there's, lots more.
Times.
Yeah. And so, our market size is just a lot smaller. So we just have to then work harder to get that same demographic. And so those are kind of things that you have to overcome. And then obviously, costs associated. We try as much as possible to, source locally, but obviously, especially in Alberta, our cost of living, it's more expensive to have a laborer to do, a particular job than, going offshore. So this is where those, you get what you pay for, and very much, we have to factor that into our costing and making sure that we have that value for our customers.
Has that been your same experience then too?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, both Chuck and Rebecca alluded to the fact that sometimes the answers are right in front of us. We look at Canada, natural resource rich. We have logging, oil and gas, automotive work happening out east. We have the agricultural sector in the prairies. The list goes on and on and on. We have a massive opportunity here to, let's say, change our production. We can actually solve a lot of our production and sell to each other and supply to each other just by looking at the problem a little bit differently. Machine shops now are talking a lot about defense, spending up in the Arctic, and industries that just keep popping up that have been right in front of us this whole time. And as Rebecca said, usually we've been looking down south, overseas into Asia, just because labor rates allowed us to make an extra 5-10% margins. Fantastic. The risks now are costing us a lot more than that. So we're taking a lot of time to look at our supply chain now and create that resilience, and intentionally going around Canada and making these relationships. And it is uncomfortable. It is like going to a new high school, but I think if we're intentional about it and not wait for the next world catastrophe, we're going to win on the back end.
Yeah, that's right. Oftentimes it takes catastrophe to kickstart us because we have no other choice. But I guess the prudent or forward-thinking businesses obviously always want to be a couple steps ahead. Chuck, I couldn't ignore that when Antu mentioned defense spending and Arctic sovereignty, you had a real reaction, nodding your head, and I wanted to throw it over to you.
Yeah, well, I think that it's sitting right in front of us again, right? I think the federal government has said that we're going to make significant investments in defense and in the Arctic. And I think those are opportunities, again, for businesses to understand, okay, how do we be a part of that? Because I think when you think defense spending, it's typically thought of as big companies that are, that are building, fighter planes and all these different kind of things. I think what we're quickly finding out is there's a whole procurement process for businesses in terms of building and all sorts of different elements to that the business community can be a part of. And I think this is something that can have a significant impact on businesses across Canada that we need to look at. The same thing with Arctic sovereignty is something that we've had conversations about. Obviously, from a Manitoba perspective, and I'm sure you've heard it from our premier and you've heard it from a whole bunch of others, we're talking about Churchill. Churchill's a big play right now in terms of a port that's sitting right in the middle of Canada that could be accessed, that needs to be fully utilized to its full potential. So we're all in on Churchill right now, but we need to make sure that we get it to a point that we can actually get those goods to markets as well. So there's all sorts of opportunities, and I think this is where the chamber network is absolutely critical. Because, both Shauna and I, we've got tentacles into communities all over the province. We represent tens of thousands of businesses. And our goal right now is how do we bring them together to do more business together that I think is really going to start benefiting communities throughout Western Canada.
We're proud chamber members. Shauna knows my whole thing. I always talk about how my grandpa worked at the Calgary Chamber. I was raised as like a chamber kid, if there's such a thing. So I'm I'm a big fan of the work that chambers do. But we're talking here about business advocacy groups and business owners taking all this initiative. And I know that that's what entrepreneurs know. And that's where entrepreneurs are comfortable. Like often business leaders will say to government, aside from perhaps regulation, safety standards, get out of the way and let us do business. We want to do business. But a big part of this is the politics of it all, isn't it? I mean, business can only do so much, right? In our live chat, let me tee this up for you, Shauna. Like Ambustion right now says, there's premiers across the country that care about having more and more control. Ambustion goes on to say that, the first step needs to be, for example, accreditation accepted across Canada. How much of this is out of the chambers and the businesses' hands and directly in front of the politicians?
Well, 100% in terms of, it's really the barriers need to be dropped provincially. There needs to be some federal directive in terms of, Prime Minister Carney has already kind of provided this directive in terms of how do we really pull down these interprovincial trade barriers and do it in a way that is not going to, the bottom line is we can't diminish, quality or safety or any of those other things when we look at doing that process. But, there has been a lot of really positive direction forward to Chuck's earlier comment. I think I've shared before, but Chuck and I are part of what's called the Chambers of the Federation. So we presented to the Council of the Federation last year, and obviously interprovincial trade barriers, economic corridors were two of the main highlights of what we wanted to talk about. We also talked about procurement. But the reason I highlight that is because we went and met with Premier Ford, who was the head of the Council of the Federation at the time. And the very next day, our Premier Smith and Premier Moe in Saskatchewan announced reduction of barriers right away. So we do know that they are listening, and we still have some ways to go. But we are identifying where are those pain points and what can we do to support moving some of that mobility and accessibility forward in a more strategic way. And I think, Chuck, you guys are in Manitoba the same way. Your premier has been very indicative of how we really work together to pull down some of these barriers. And that's really positive when we look at the work that we're doing on these interprovincial trade missions. So, just want to kind of highlight that Antu and Rebecca were both part of our inaugural trade mission that we took to Winnipeg back in December. And, we're just really trying to find boots on the ground ways to do that advocacy work, but also to create those relationships amongst businesses in the prairie provinces so that they do have new access to supply chains and that they do have access to supplier visibility and be able to see where, the new supplier could be or the new customer could be.
Rebecca,
that was a very long-winded answer.
No, hey, we call it long form, not long-winded. Yeah, long form is it's more informative. Rebecca, when you decide, you commit your time, you commit your resources to one of those interprovincial or these trade missions. What makes it genuinely valuable for you?
Well, the interesting thing about that trade mission was that I have actually had prior conversations with a lot of the organizations that we were meeting with. So to actually have my feet on the ground, we went to New Flyer, we went to Fort Garry Industries.
New Flyer, they build the buses,
the transit buses that we have here in Edmonton.
Yeah,
those are actually manufactured there. So those ongoing conversations that we've had over the last several years, actually being there and seeing live what they are doing. That's ultimately how you create those relationships even further, and even just the networking with the Alberta delegation that went to. I never would have met a lot of these companies, and the conversations that are started and that will continue to evolve. This doesn't happen overnight, but it then helps develop these relationships, and ultimately, we're able to hopefully increase revenue, create tax dollars, and ultimately this is then able to pay back. But even going to the polytechnics in Winnipeg, I'd had conversations with them. So there's so many similarities that Nate and Sate here in Alberta have with they have heavy duty technicians, they have welders, they have fabricators, and let's work together instead of doing a whole bunch of different courses work and stuff. Let's work together, develop one kind of syllabus, and then you're not recreating these, and then you can go interprovincially depending on where you're needed.
This is such an obvious thing, but I think no matter what your business is, at least with the majority of businesses, there's nothing like meeting in person, right? There's nothing like learning someone's first name, shaking someone's hand, sharing experiences, collaborating. It was important 100 years ago, and I think it's still important today, especially in the context of this relationship building, barrier breaking.
Yeah, no, I think it's extremely important. And something else that I found very valuable with the trade mission that we did in Winnipeg is we had the opportunity to sit. We maybe the timing was just right, but we went to a Manitoba Chamber of Commerce event, and we were just dropped in this event where they discussed a lot of the challenges that they're going through as a province, as well as a lot of the solutions they're coming up with. This was eye-opening to me because we are struggling with some of the same challenges, but some different ones. And the solutions they're coming up with, there could be some cross-pollination there. I spoke at large with Chris Avery, up at the Churchill port, and just seeing what their vision is and what they're looking at developing up there. They're going to need a lot of infrastructure, and Alberta has, a lot of experience with our oil sands and a lot of technology, running pipelines and things of that nature. And so just naturally, there's a lot of opportunity, but I don't think a lot of these things would happen, mature, come to fruition if we weren't all in the same room. And historically, that's been a challenge. So it was very valuable to be in a room with all these other leaders in a different province.
Chuck, based on your experience, do you think that there's an opportunity in Canada, or can you think of one off the top of your head that you think maybe businesses underestimate?
I do think it's just those relationships, and I think that's the key part. And so one of the things, and we've been doing these trade missions, but we've been doing it within our own province for the past 6 or 7 years, and taking Winnipeg is unique because we've got this one major city in Manitoba, and then you've got all these smaller communities, and typically what happens is business leaders never get outside the perimeter here in Manitoba. And so what we've been doing is taking them into communities and making them understand that there's important industries and important companies throughout the province. And I think that's really the key part. And I think we were thrilled to be able to partner with the Alberta Chamber to bring some business leaders here to understand what we have to offer. I want to do likewise. I want our business leaders to come to Alberta. And at the end of the day, we don't need government to help us do this. This is about relationship building. This is about finding opportunities to kind of work together. Businesses will figure it out. What they sometimes need is they need that warm introduction. And I think that's where we can really play a role to make sure that we're providing them a warm introduction, introducing to other business leaders, and letting them be business people. And I think that's the key role that we're really trying to focus on.
Chuck, do you see Manitoba as a competitor to, let me put it this way, like, Manitoba businesses as competing with Alberta businesses when it comes to like labor force numbers, investment, and the like? We've spent a lot of time looking at the Alberta advantage, so to speak. What's the Manitoba equivalent?
For sure it is. I mean, there's no question it's a competition. We've got an issue in Manitoba, and there's probably more Manitobans out working in Alberta now on an ongoing basis. We're always trying to drag them back. We need to be more competitive. I think that's healthy competition between our provinces that should always exist. And I think all it does is it raises the bar and it makes us all better. So, we're not afraid to compete against Alberta. We recognize that we've had, people leaving our province and going to other jurisdictions because they think things are better off. We've got advantages here as well from a very diversified economy, great opportunities, cost of living, a whole bunch of things. We're ready to compete, but at the same time, we're ready to work together to make sure that we can all compete as an entire Western region too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll notice that I'm steering clear of any opportunistic references to the Winnipeg Jets right now. It would be
no sporting references.
It would be inappropriate. You would probably invoke the Calgary Flames. We'd get into some sort of inter-provincial trash talk. We don't need that. Listen, I've appreciated all of your time, and I want to go sort of around the horn to wrap here and give each of you just a sort of a chance to chime in on this. And I guess in the form of a call to action to the audience, really, and an advocacy tool at the same time. So I want to ask, based on your own experience, Antu, will come to you first. What's a practical step, and it could be a big or a small step, Rebecca, that you think chambers or businesses can do, a big step over the next few months that you think would strengthen interprovincial trade? What's one?
I think it's probably for us, what it's been and what it could be for others is to really audit your supply chain, both up and downstream, and see how much is domestic and how much is international. When we look internationally, we assign risk to it based on all the geopolitical tensions and tariffs and blah, 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 blah. Within Canada, we can reduce some of that, even though costs might be a little bit higher. I think it's just taking a really hard look at how we can produce more domestically, not necessarily because I want to reduce interprovincial trade, but because I must. We're going to be left with no option and leave ourselves really exposed if we don't.
Yeah. How about you, Rebecca?
I think the ability to get outside of your comfort zone, make those leaps, start those conversations that you wouldn't have necessarily had before, I think are some key things. Be willing to, take a chance and point and pivot, look at new markets, go after, something that you would have, wanted to stay safe in, because they do take a while. They're not an overnight success, but having those conversations now, it's going to be amazing to see what interprovincial trade and the opportunities that we're going to have in the next couple of years.
Yeah, Shauna, it's not lost. Like, my one takeaway here is that a lot of this falls on businesses and chambers. That's kind of the takeaway that I have right now here. But how would you take the question?
Yeah, so I think, really chambers play a very unique role here because we sit right at that intersection between policy and operations. So practically, that means that, we can connect those businesses directly to one another, so that we're not just sharing data points or reports, that they can actually, you heard how important the relationship building is. I think, too, the other thing that we can do really well is grounding our policy advocacy into that real business experience. So how that helps is it really gives us the opportunity to provide government with the case to really look at solutions for the challenges and what are the actual challenges on the ground that we need to be fixing. And then just being able to design those initiatives like the trade missions so that we can provide those opportunities. And really excited to be doing that, in a really strategic way over the course of the next few years. Specifically within Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And, just my hats off to Chuck and his team for supporting us on our pilot trade mission, and really excited that in April, we're going to be going to Saskatchewan.
Nice.
So we're taking another trade mission to Saskatchewan here right away that will focus in a little bit more on, value add and tech ag and those types of things that are going on in Saskatchewan, and we have many in Alberta doing the same stuff. So I think the Chamber has a unique role to play, and I think we're going to continue to be really laser focused on it, because as you heard from our panelists, this is becoming something that must happen, not just it would be nice to have it happen.
Yeah, no kidding. Imperative. Chuck, last word to you, my man.
Yeah, look, I think, we're thrilled to be able to continue to work with Alberta Chamber of Commerce. I think continue to push your local government as well and your elected officials to get rid of as many internal trade barriers as possible. We want to be able to work together with other provinces. We were thrilled to host Alberta back in December. We want you to come to Churchill with us in July as well. I'm already putting the pieces in place. Our provincial government is all in. They just provided us with $500,000 yesterday as a result, something that came out of the provincial budget. They want us going to Alberta as well. And so look for Manitoba license plate, look for Manitoba companies to be coming to your province very soon.
Does it still say Friendly Manitoba on the plates?
It absolutely does.
Good. Just making sure. Chuck, great debut on the show. Love to have you here, President and CEO, Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. Shauna Feth, always wonderful to see you. We love our monthly sit down with you, Eye on Alberta Business. Shauna Feth, the President and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. And then very cool to have these two in studio. Rebecca Goldsack, COO at Diesel Tech Industries here in Edmonton, and Antu Chicahuala, the CEO of Accusteel Heavy Haul Trailers. Thanks for this, everybody.
For having us.
You got it.
Thank you guys for participating.
Real Talkers, we want to know how this lands with you, in particular business owners, those of you that are involved on the policy side. If maybe there's an insight that you have that you didn't hear here, you can always leave a comment on the YouTube episode, leave a comment on Spotify, or send us an email anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We are in the business of follow-up and continuing conversations, and that's exactly where we'll go with this. I mean, this roundtable itself is an example of a continuing conversation around those interprovincial trade barriers in the bigger picture, Canada's economic future. The conversation today happened in partnership with the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, and you can find them online. Learn more about the benefits of membership by visiting abchamber.ca. I want to get to an interesting email from Catherine. She's an immigration lawyer, and she gives us her take on that story involving the midwife, Heather Gilchrist. That's coming up in just a moment. But before we do, I'm thrilled to remind you that Northwest Film Fest is coming back, friends, from April 8th to 14th at Edmonton's iconic Metro Cinema at the Garneau. This is the absolute best in local and international indie filmmaking. Also home, by the way, to the Rainbow Visions Film Festival and Northwest Fear Fest. You can check it out all online at northwestfest.ca. They're showcasing a ton of films this year that are made right here in the Metro Edmonton region, and also some that I've been really looking forward to seeing for quite some time, including Dolph Unbreakable. That's right, the story of Dolph Lundgren. What do you need to say about Dolph Lundgren? One of the all-timers when it comes to action movies. They've got The Perfect Match, The Forbidden University, and of course the Edmonton Film Prize finalists as well, which will be announced next week. Glenn Hall in the spotlight. Mr. Goalie is the feature there. Another wild ride, a story of a Texas narcotics officer who turned on the police force. That film Never Get Busted. I mean, there's more and more than you can believe. You can pick up your all-access pass or go show by show at northwestfilmfest.ca. We have a super cool filmmakers roundtable coming up here on the show in just a short while. And our YouTube Real Deal and Real VIP subscribers, as well as our Real Talk patrons, our Patreon supporters, well, we're going to be sending you to the movies. So you can look for messaging over the next 24 to 48 hours on exactly how we'll do that. Real Talk's always very proud to partner with Northwest Film Fest at northwestfest.ca. Hey guys, if you, I'm not seeking compliments, Johnny. I'm not looking for compliments necessarily, but if you like my look today, the jacket I'm wearing, if you like this kind of, what do you call this kind of light sweater top, I'm happy to let you know I picked it up. Where do you think? At the Helm Clothing, and you can find them in a 3-story luxury retail experience downtown Edmonton, 103rd Street, about a block from our studio, or online at thehelmclothing.com. That's where you can shop their full collection, including a brand new season of Ralph Lauren Purple Label. Now, what you're seeing here is the fall-winter collection. They've been offering those at a discounted price recently, and of course, they're laying out the spring collection as well. You can browse it all online, and the benefit, I would say, when I love going in store and talking to their team and having them put looks together, but the benefit of shopping online is that with the promo code REALTALK, they're going to take 10% off your order. So there you go. 10% off the entire order. No small print when you use the promo code REALTALK online at thehelmclothing.com. Our friends at Solar by Kuby letting us know that the spring installation schedule is filling up quickly. So if you're hoping to go green this spring or summer, if you're looking to get solar panels on the roof of your home, your business, your barn, whatever it is, you're going to want to connect with Kuby today at kuby.ca. That's Kuby.ca, where the quote is always free. Their team of engineers will get working on the project. If there's any government incentives or any sort of financial, it could be a municipal, provincial, or federal incentive, the team at Kuby will know about it. They'll handle all the paperwork. There's no headaches on your end. You can get that quote today at Kuby.ca. And of course, our friends at North Road Investment Council reminding you that as we're talking finances, as we're talking the economy, as we're talking about markets, a steady hand and a studied voice has never been more important when it comes to guidance through wealth and investing, and that's exactly what the team at North Road Investment Council offers. Our February 24th episode, if you want to go back in our archives, you'll find Carrie Williams from North Road talking about the impact that AI is having on markets, in particular just leveling tech stocks, at least in the short term. Carrie with some sage insight, sage advice in that interview. That was the 24th of February. If you'd like to directly connect with the team at North Road, maybe get a second set of eyes on your current investment strategy, you can find them online at northroadic.com. That's northroadic.com. Looking forward to Marshall McAllister. He's going to join us from North Road in studio. Should be next week. We're going to talk about digital risk assessments. That's something that, regardless of what your portfolio looks like, all of us are staring down digital risks, maybe without realizing it. That interview could save you a whole lot of headache. That's coming up next week. Presented by North Road Investment Council, online at northroadic.com. Show's technical director, John Hicks, flying the plane behind the scenes. Nice job on the balance of in-person and remote roundtables. Don't blame Shauna for staying off the highways today. For people that are listening to this show on their vacations in Costa Rica and Guatemala and Panama and everywhere else, no headaches, but it's been a bit of a late spring dump outside, bit of a pain in the ass. I wonder if Real Talkers have heard the gas-powered snowblowers working just outside our building.
Behind us? Yeah, they probably have.
I think so, probably. Ytrium says, we were talking about Churchill, says, I love how everybody tries to make Churchill out like it's some magical place. Says it's been all but abandoned for reasons that are nearly impossible to overcome. That from Ytrium. Yeah, I hear a different perspective on Churchill from a good friend of mine, Travis McEwen. You guys know him? He's a journalist for the CBC. Grew up in Churchill, so his frame of reference is wild. The guy grew up around polar bears. The guy grew up in that remote community. But Ytrium, you're right. There's different opinions on the validity of some of the big visions that people have for that part of Manitoba. Certainly we've heard it in Alberta mentioned several times as a possible pipeline destination for access to international shipping. I'm curious to hear from people in Manitoba where you land on that. Mark chiming in says, I was an exporter for most of my adult life. Very little to the U.S., though, he says. There was no government support at all. In fact, nothing but barriers when we were trying to export to different countries. Gilles says, I'd love to see Alberta dropping a lot of its trade barriers, a lot of the barriers it has right now with BC. Gilles says you would think them wanting pipeline construction, they would have dropped those already. But no, Jill, I wonder if maybe that factors into the negotiations, right? You hold your cards until you're ready to play them. I don't know if there's acts of good faith when it comes to this or not. But there are some silly barriers. I try not to use alcohol, John, as every single anecdote that I use. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of my friends are in the brewing and distilling business. We don't speak for our friends at Hanson Distillery, but that's an example. A proud Alberta distillery, and then you look at the issues that they have getting their product across the country. Craft brewers would tell you the exact same thing. We do have an interesting update. We were talking about that wine tax that Alberta had implemented a while ago. You remember Joe Gerba was on the show talking to us about that. And it was like, this isn't what it was actually called, but it was basically like a luxury wine tax. It was like the higher end wines were getting taxed higher. So the more valuable the bottle would be, the higher the tax would be. And you can understand why a government would think that was a pretty good idea from a bottom line standpoint. You can understand why wine reps, let alone vineyards, and restaurateurs, as an example, would think it's a terrible idea, because they're having to crank up their prices to absorb the increase. And then, of course, all the customer sees is the menu prices going up, the wine list prices going up, and they think that's what? The restaurateur padding their pockets, and that's not the case. Well, we got an update from Joe just a short time ago that let us know that the wine tax is being dropped. It's being rolled back, and he figured that the Real Talk exposure went a long way in driving that conversation forward. He was saying that it was basically something that, it wasn't on a lot of people's radar. People have so much to focus on, and, we hear about, the international things that are happening, and then the daily news events that flare up and the stuff that's flying under the radar. Does the average person know why your fuel costs can rise or fall by 10 or 15 cents a liter? Sometimes it might be obvious, Iran, for example, and I think for a lot of other people, sometimes you just kind of grin and bear it, as they say. You just kind of take it. You know what I mean?
They seem to think they know a lot.
Yeah. Joe's exact message to me, he said, it worked. This is a personal text message. He says, it worked, with a whole bunch of exclamation marks. He says the ad valorem wine tax is being repealed as of April 1st. And he said, thank you so much for having us on the show to talk about it. Says we kept at it and we felt like we were yelling into the wind. But the new budget says that it's that ad valorem wine tax is being rescinded. It's being taken out in favor of a flat 58 cent per liter hike on all wine across the board. So there's an update on the wine front. So that's good news for those of you that have the, you maintain the fancy wine cellars, which I think would be good. What did you make of the, it's hardly surprising, I think, to see a real varying opinions on the Mark Carney report cards. Had like 800 comments on Facebook about it. So
I just think it's funny
eager.
when they're so far to the other sides. A plus 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 plus, and then it's like F. It's like, okay, like I think our guest yesterday, Lynda Steele, was pretty bang on. I think I'd give him a B, maybe a B minus. At the top of it, a B plus. But I do think I also kind of agree with Tristin yesterday that Carney's at a point where, like, he needs something substantial now. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, it's fine to fly around the country. And I didn't agree. We had a comment earlier today. Someone said, send the finance minister. You don't send the finance minister around the world to try and make trade deals. Like, obviously, he has to. And, man, if I was traveling as much as our prime minister has in this year, I would be so like, he has been absolutely everywhere. But now we need something substantial, right? We've seen him in Alberta shaking hands with our premier, with the MOU. We've got the carbon tax scrapped. We've got all these, promises on the military and investment and building homes and bringing business to the country.
Yeah.
And it's great. We've signed all the documents, everything. But now, year two, there's got to be something substantial that's got to happen. And I think the top priority for everyone, obviously, is dealing with Donald Trump and getting a trade deal, a Kuzma, something solidified. But even below that, if we saw these promises to build all these homes, 1 million homes or whatever it is, like if we saw groundbreaking on that stuff, I know Alberta would love if there was a shovel, even one shovel in the ground on a pipeline. But any one of these things, Ryan, if one of them just substantially gets started, it would be a big check mark. And that would
totally
maybe bring them up to an A.
Yeah. You're getting graded. You're getting a performance review in our live chat right now from Matthew, who says, I actually haven't heard any snowblowers, and I would like to formally complain about Johnny's amazing sound mixing. I think Matthew wants the vibe. He wants the ambience of the snowblowers in the background.
You will notice that during our first two interviews, I usually chime in at some point. I didn't, because my mic right here faces this window, and that's where they do the snow. So I just stayed in the background and kept it off.
I see an Adam C in our live chat, and I wonder, I mean, I could be wrong, but I wonder if this is Adam C, who's one of the owners of Analog Brewing here in Edmonton. I wonder if that's the same Adam C. And I love this. He's invoking Ronald Reagan. He's doing his best Ronald Reagan. He says, Doug Ford, tear down these walls. I love that, Adam. That's a deep pull that only those of our vintage or more mature could possibly pick up on. But well played, Adam. I like that. Back on the report card. We don't need to obsess over it. Kevin says the Prime Minister's been brilliant. Bruce gives him an A. Brian gives him aces. Great job. Joshua, meantime, says I'm going to rate him no better than a D+. Says he ran on a platform of unity and got a grade among grocery prices. That would be a failing grade as well. Joshua says Carney's tried to reinvent the wheel on trade. I feel like he's pissing around, and his true intent is to steal a majority government. He says, no, hang on, I'm not done. He says, I love stuff. Man, you know what? If you're just going to read normal comments, why are you even reading the comments? He says, I believe Michael Ignatieff-style policies are coming for Canada when he gets his slime majority.
I just think it's always funny. And I'm not some... world economic expert. But it's always funny when people, especially who I think are intelligent, think that the Prime Minister can lower the price of like Mexican bananas, or you know what I mean? Or that Trump can make a carton of eggs cheaper. Like, it's impossible. There's so many layers to, and part of it is like fuel on a truck and carbon pricing on that, and et cetera. But it's just crazy when people think the guy at the top can just sign a document or pull a lever and make groceries, half the cost that they are, or make eggs affordable, or bring gas prices down. It's there's so many factors that are in play. But that's the last thing on my mind. Like I understand that groceries are expensive in Canada, but look everywhere. I mean, where are groceries not expensive right now? Where
on the farm, baby?
In like the world's top 10 economies. I'm talking about here in Europe, Japan, Australia, the UK, like the United States. Everywhere food is expensive right now. So I don't think it's one, guy sitting at the top of the pyramid or whatever who's just, yes, I can't wait for them to pay $7 for one banana.
Right. I wonder if more people are growing their own food. I wonder if more people are...
You're in Alberta?
Yeah. I mean, seriously, though.
I mean, maybe those little herb farms by the window?
Greenhouses and stuff. I mean, I remember, I don't know if he wants me to mention this or not, who cares, but, former Edmonton mayoral candidate Michael Walters went over at his house for a beer, 2 summers ago, something like that, and he showed me his backyard, and his family has basically, not exactly, but almost basically pulled up every blade of grass in the entire yard, almost. And they have these rows upon rows upon rows of garden right there in their urban setting, and it's incredible. Like there's Kevin Koswin's been on the show before. You guys find him on Instagram if you ever want to be. He does this show called Into the Wild, and he's he's like a legit hunter gatherer. Like Kevin Koswin's a fascinating guy. He lives a few blocks from us, right here in the heart, like 10 minutes out of downtown. His front and backyard is total urban ag, and I'd be curious to know, for a lot of people, it's probably like a lifestyle thing. For a lot of people, it's probably a mental health thing. You love, you sort of tend to your garden, you find joy in it, you're very proud of it, you should be. But I wonder if for a lot of people, these things like grocery prices, the things you can control, I'm not very good at gardening, so I don't know what grows best here, but I know a lot of people, you can grow your potatoes, and you can grow corn, you can grow onions. My grandparents used to love growing huge stalks of rhubarb. Are more people, do you think, inclined to do that sort of thing? I wouldn't be surprised. If we're talking to you, send us an email. Let us know.
Well, it's not hard. Farmers are going to get on me, but you have a short window, here, long winters. But yeah, I know other people who are doing gardens back. And somebody told me they're like, grow tomatoes first because they're kind of easy.
Is that right?
I'm like, I
Well,
don't
you
know.
can
I
grow
think they'd all be
tomatoes
hard for me
on your
but
balcony. You can
yeah,
get a
that's what
tomato
I mean.
in like
you can put them in
yeah.
like a pot or
And they look
whatever,
cool.
You start, yeah.
Yeah. We put an apple tree when we got Eden Landscaping to do our backyard. They do an amazing job, by the way. You know, an apple tree. It's just like, yeah, it's not like dramatically dropping grocery prices, but it's pretty awesome to see a kid, especially in this day and age. You know, they're jumping on the trampoline. They take a second. They rip an apple off the tree and crush it. Like, that's amazing to see.
But
I
mean,
that.
it's not the price of vegetables that are the major problem at the grocery store. You know, you need to buy chicken because eggs are expensive. You need to I bake your own bread. Bread's kind of expensive. Bread goes up and down so much. I'm like, I think.
Did you ever get on the sourdough train during COVID? Remember, everybody was learning how to make sourdough.
Tons of people I know are on sourdough.
Bake sourdough.
They're like, they keep saying the same thing. It's 4 ingredients and it only takes this much.
But you got to keep your starter alive.
I know.
You got to feed the starter.
We've got a guy here who does a mean sourdough. He's got like the oven out there and everything.
But nobody does better sourdough than Friesen Brothers in 16 Alberta communities. Boomshanker X says, I don't think that most Canadians even realize how much trouble that we're really in. Super Chat Ken says, the guy at the top, in quotes, is definitely influencing costs for consumers. I wonder if that's a Trump reference. Gilles says his entire backyard is edible as well. Says a massive food garden, including fence is made out of, what's that stuff called? Peanut brittle. He says there's a lot of permaculture back there. That from Gilles, which is cool. And Steph M is 100% correct. Says there needs to be more grocery competition. It seems like Galen Weston has the monopoly on the grocery market.
You know what?
Shop local at Friesen Brothers.
I know you rolled your eyes, and I know you pushed back when Avi Lewis was on here and mentioned like the government sponsored whatever.
Right.
But like, at least he has an idea. Like something has to be done. I don't want to mention, names of places or whatever, but like it is kind of like a cartel where like, little guys can't. There needs to be a bit more competition in that space,
100%.
especially provincially. Like you go to, I'll talk about Ontario. I don't want to talk about here because then I have to start naming places here. And all I want to do is put a heart around Friesen Bros and just end that convo. But like, Loblaws in Ontario and like PC in Ontario, there's no room for anyone else, right? And it's big money. And those guys, I mean, when you look at some of the prices of things, how there's such stark contrast in different parts of the year in different provinces. You're like, how does this make sense? A box of cereal should be around the same price all year. Well, not all year round. I understand things go up and down, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Some of the prices get outrageous, and a lot of people know that right now. Like when they go to do their budget, from 2 years ago, how much grocery prices have increased. And some of the things, somebody brought up the bread price fixing scandal. We know that it's fingers meddling, right?
Fucking Trudeau and the bread fixing.
Well, I just said, I'm like, the prime minister wasn't responsible for the bread price fixing scandal again, but
Jillian says Alberta pickles a lot of stuff and says it's noticeable. And after your first winter living here, you realize why. That is so true. When I think of pickled beets, I think of my grandma, and there is nothing like a pickled beet. Honestly, I could crush 100 of them. Schneids says gardening can be therapeutic, but the cost of it, if it's lost, is high, 100%. RS says their mom had a backyard garden for decades: carrots, tomatoes, potatoes, onions, garlic, green onion. We had a neighbor drop off like a shopping bag full of garlic last summer. I was like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, and I married a Ukrainian.
Eat some cloves.
Well, I guess. I mean, I love garlic, but some people love garlic. By the way, Gilles followed up are like us being smartasses about his fence. He says, actually,
he can't eat it. It's graham crackers.
He says he grows stuff on the fence. He installed a new squash tunnel. So maybe the squash is growing up. We have a great relationship with our next door neighbor. You see him sometimes in the chat. I think he wants to stay anonymous, so I won't say his name. But we have hops that grow over the fence, and they're just decorative. We're not like brewing beer right now with them, but just absolutely beautiful. But they keep hens. They keep chickens in their backyard. I think there's about 8 of them. They're beautiful birds, by the way. They're always funky ones. You know, they're not kind of like your classic white or red or brown, the ones you see. They're like all these exotic looking hens. And I've had a few people ask us, you know, what do you think about it? Like your neighbors keeping chickens, like, do they stink? Are they loud? Number one,
who are these people?
Fresh eggs, whenever the neighbor is feeling generous.
Yeah,
and
come on.
And like an egg laid within 30 meters of your frying pan is pretty unreal. Number two, there's been zero negative.
Yeah.
And 3, actually, the other day I was out. It was, I was probably like minus 20. And just because, guys, honestly, I am the husband and father of the year. So I was out and I was taking the garbage out. It's probably like minus 20. It's like, I don't know, about 5:30 in the morning. And I just heard that, like, for a split second, I was like, what is that sound? And then I realized it was all the hens just quietly clucking at like 5:30 in the morning. And it was this, like, incredible, peaceful, like it wasn't like the rooster, like cock-a-doodle-doo. It's not that at 5:30 in the morning, but super cool.
Yeah.
I know, more and more people are keeping bees. My parents-in-law in beautiful Middle Lake, Saskatchewan, they're keeping bees out there.
I love it. Let's do it.
People are doing that kind of stuff.
Neighbors that are complaining about this are probably the same neighbors that have like 3 designer dogs that bark their frickin' heads off every morning, and they're complaining about your neighbor who has these awesome, gorgeous hens that give them free food.
Yeah, 100%. Marie says, I grow tomatoes and peppers. Peppers, great idea, Marie. On her deck says potatoes and squash in the garden. White by the way, says, guys, just about anything can be grown on a deck. Potatoes, corn, sunflowers, peas, zucchini. Do people grow sunflowers like for the seeds or mostly decorative? Decorative? We grew up around a family that had...
It's 2 birds, 1 stone.
I was a kid, so when I say they were like 8 feet tall, maybe they were 6 feet tall and I was tiny. But there's nothing like there's always these families that grow these massive sunflowers. By the end of the year, they look just amazing. A lot of people, Anubius with a warning says rye is a gateway to sourdough. So really be careful out there, folks, for sure. Gosh, this is amazing. Aaron's growing peas and beans, yellow and green, potatoes, tomatoes, and says, and we have one of the best crabapple trees in the neighborhood. That's a real commitment, the crabapple tree. You got to be, you can't have thousands of crab apples dropping on the ground and rotting, number one. And number two, Johnny, have you ever run a lawnmower over a bunch of crab apples on the ground? It is not advisable. But if you are making the crab apple jelly, Aaron, I know I don't have to tell you, it's pretty unbelievable. Super Chat says, I'm all for free market. I'm all for capitalism, but oligopolies, monopolies are not free market capitalism. Capitalism only works with effective anti-competitive regulation, and he is 100% correct. Victoria, what's up, Victoria, says we need to grade Carney on what's in his control, not on outcomes that are too soon to measure or beyond his control. He says that could be, Victoria says that could be Trump or it could be obstruction by Pierre Poilievre for that matter. Says the PM gets an A for doing all he can. I'm going to read backyard farming reports all day long. RS says my backyard has apple and plum trees with raspberry and Saskatoon bushes. Says I have bags of raspberries in my freezer. Maybe a little raspberry wheat ale, a few frozen raspberries in there, Johnny. What do you think about that? Not too shabby. Not too shabby. In our most recent episode of the show, we talked to National Post columnist Tristin Hopper. We talked about the story of Heather Gilchrist. I recommend you check it out. Let us know what you think. This is one of my favorite emails in a long time from Catherine McAteer. She's an immigration lawyer, and I want to get to it in just a moment. When we say this is not bullshit. When we say, like, people that really know what they're talking about are always listening to the show. And so when we're giving you our email address and inviting you to leave comments, it's because we know that people in the space with years of experience will shine light on the stories for us in addition to our guest roster. And that's exactly the case here. But in case you did not catch our conversation with Tristin Hopper, this would have been on the 25th of March about Heather Gilchrist, this Scottish midwife. Here's a summary of the story that's making news. The letter is basically like Get the fuck out or we'll come get you.
Just it's very cold, bureaucratic. It's a nightmare.
It's a tough look for Canada on the international stage.
It's just been this odyssey, getting form letters back from the immigration department, contacting our MP, contacting the Minister of Health for BC, saying, you wanted foreign professionals to come, and now I'm being, completely screwed over by some technical glitch with your federal immigration department. Could you please deal with it before I have to leave and I'm out $60,000 and filled with a hatred of Canada for the rest of my life?
Right.
He didn't say that, but I imagine that would be the outcome.
This is the exact type of situation where you would hope someone would choose Canada, and I bet you there's going to be more than a few people that see this and go, I would never risk. Imagine if I risked my own 60 grand. Imagine if I inconvenienced myself. Imagine if I moved my whole life to Canada and then got treated like this. It's brutal. So that's a small portion of our conversation with Tristin Hopper, and you can check out the full interview wherever you get your podcast or on our YouTube channel. Thanks to everybody that subscribes. Catherine writes in to talk@ryanjesperson.com, says, good morning, Real Talker. She says, I caught your interview on March 25th about the Scottish midwife whose work permit was refused, talking about Heather Gilchrist. Says, as an immigration lawyer in Calgary, what struck me was not the refusal itself, but the attention this case is receiving, in part because of the applicant's nationality, but also because she's in a high-profile occupation. She's a midwife. Catherine says, refusals for incomplete applications are extremely common in the IRCC system. That's Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. Says one of the most frequent issues, especially with post-graduation work permits, is the missing language test results. She says that's that CELPIP that Tristin Hopper was referring to, which is a common language test. It's not a course, by the way. She says that appears to be the situation here. And she says this is something that lawyers see every day across all nationalities. Catherine says it's also worth clarifying that applicants cannot call and speak directly with immigration officers. That hasn't been possible for many years. So cases like this are typically resolved through a reconsideration or a corrected application. But yeah, she says it's true. Applicants and lawyers are driven crazy on a daily basis by these form letter email responses from the case-specific inquiry system. And this is now Ryan talking back to Catherine's email in a moment. This is the big deal here. And Johnny, I think that this is what you and I, well, I won't speak for you, but this is certainly what I was kind of baffled by, gobsmacked by, is that if we're concerned that a British national, that a Scottish midwife doesn't know how to speak English, can this not be resolved with a 45-second conversation on the phone before we threaten to deport her?
Well, I will say, and we talked about this yesterday, the Irish and Scottish, like if you met someone from some of those boroughs, it can be like you can't understand them. But regardless, I agree with you. Like, I'm of the thinking, and people will disagree with me, like computers are better than humans at things when they have to do a lot of things the same over and over and over. Like taking in information from people, stats, birthdays, where they've been, have they been up to date with this, sucking. The problem with it, and especially with AI now, is if it ingests a piece of information that is false and takes it as true, it starts going down the funnel and it starts relating to a bunch of other things and a bunch of forks in the road, and it gets stuck in there. And we've seen this. This is what's happening now, right?
Totally.
And it's hard to revert it. So, I mean, I agree with you and Tristan. Like, this should be a 5-minute phone call.
Max.
Right?
Maximum.
Like, what is happening here?
So Catherine follows up, and back to Catherine McAteer's email. By the way, her firm is Confluence Law. If you want to connect with her, confluencelaw.ca out of Calgary. Shout out to Catherine for being a friend of the show. She says, so yeah, applicants and lawyers are driven crazy on a daily basis by these form letter email responses from the case-specific inquiry system. These aren't letters that are like, please submit your test result when you're able. Or it's like, get out. It's like, get out or we're coming to get you. That's basically what the letter says. Anyway, she signs off by saying, what I find frustrating, and this is the most important point, what I find frustrating is the contradiction we hear every day. Broad anti-immigrant rhetoric on one hand, and on the other, repeated appeals for attention to a single deserving case. She has deserving in quotes, a deserving case because it feels familiar or relatable. Catherine says, in practice, there are thousands of deserving cases. and most of them never make the news. That from immigration lawyer Catherine down in Calgary. It's a great point, and it's 100% true.
Yeah, I got to agree here. I mean, look, I can't negate the fact that, like, this is a horrible hiccup and it could be fixed in a minute, but also it's a white, blonde, blue-eyed woman
from Scotland
where they are genuinely, no offense, speaking English, even though you can't understand them sometimes. I am not trying to make light of this. And there are tons of people with different skin color who speak 3 or 4 different languages having these similar issues, and they're not on the front page of the National Post.
100%. Because if it's someone from, Zimbabwe or Finland or Thailand, you're going to go, the average Canadian is going to go, well, like, do they speak English? Like, I don't know. I'm going to trust immigration control on this.
The average Canadian won't care.
The system is
They'll
working.
Be like,
well, there would never be a news
too many
headline.
People already,
new Canadian from Zimbabwe or new Canadian from Finland to be deported for, lack of English comprehension.
I
You're
can
gonna
see
go, okay,
the comments
fine.
under the post.
Well, a lot of
now.
people would say, good. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. That's kind of the
100%.
thing, right? But as soon as you see the headline, British midwife or Scottish midwife, you go, wait a second, what's the story here? And you click on it. But Catherine, I love that. And this is I would have read it anyway. Catherine, you're obviously a credible source, but when she says there are thousands of deserving cases, most of them never make the news. It's a good reminder to us that there are so many people that have very real plights, very real challenges in front of them, that they're fighting for fair treatment, or they're fighting to do everything they can for their family. And we're never talking about it on the show. That's also a reminder that you can ensure that we are aware of stories that deserve more attention, and you can send us your story ideas anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Honestly, guys, we could keep on going here because Ken K is talking about growing Haskaps, and many of you are talking about, by the way, zucchini relish is apparently like a really big deal in the Real Talk community. There's like a whole conversation happening right now on backyard gardening. I absolutely love it. And you can, of course, by the way, keep the conversation going on our Real Talk community chat. That's our Discord. That goes 24 hours a day. And we've got a couple of Real Talkers that are doing an amazing job for us in there, just keeping it. Darren and Justin, they keep it organized. They've got the news sub channel, Johnny, or whatever they call it. You can tell I'm not in charge, and that's a good thing. They got the politics one, they got the pop culture one, and that's a benefit of membership if you support us with a YouTube channel membership at the Real Deal, Real VIP level, or on Patreon. And as a reminder, you will also be getting access to movie tickets to go check out Northwest Film Fest as well. As we wrap this episode, I want to let you know Stephen Carter, the strategist, joins us on the next show. It's going to be wildly entertaining, I can promise you that. And then a roundtable in honor of Ben Stelter. We're proud to support the Ben Stelter Foundation. Check out benstelterfoundation.com to sign up, register for the Hearts and Hands Poker Tournament. That goes April 16th and 17th. I'll be there at the table. Come take all my money and support a charity. We'll talk to you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton, member emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.